Welcome back to the Blitz Crosstalk. I'm Brianna Dix, joined by my co-host and former NFL scout, Brian Broaddus. It's a little late, but happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
You are
that.
welcome. I know you had to work a big game day.
Yeah.
Probably, 13 plus hours, but how was the celebration?
It was good. It's so funny because you get used, especially this time of year with a December birthday, you get used to games being played.
Football, yeah.
So my whole life has always been around like birthday and a football game. And it's funny, teams play well wherever I'm involved, whether it was the Cowboys, the Packers, whatever. It's just the team played well when it was my birthday. So it's cool. I mean, that part of it's fun, but huge win. The football team was playing for a lot. They really were. And they were playing to get back in it. They were playing to get back in the division. And your defense was just so dominant. And it's so funny, and I know we're probably going to get into this, but it's really amazing to me how well, and Dan Quinn and this defensive staff, I know you love covering this team because of the access you have to those guys. But it's amazing to me how these defensive coaches have gone really the whole year without players. And they've had to play with safeties as linebackers. They've had to play as linebackers as defensive end. And they look better equipped. They look better equipped to handle what's going on with the season than what the offense has done. And it's a shame. The offense started off so well. And there's so many things that we're going to probably get into, but it's just amazing how well that Dan Quinn, the defensive staff, and what they really destroyed the will of the football team to compete last week on offense. And the Cowboy offense could have just punished them with all the way that they were getting off the field and holding football team in check and all that. So good for the defense, good for Dan Quinn, good for all those defensive coaches. Kellen Moore and those guys have got a lot of questions they need to answer right now.
Well, and I think one of the most interesting things is you look at last year, the defense was the liability of this team. And a year later, Dan Quinn comes in, and now this is the strength of your team, the asset, what is carrying this team.
Right.
And, he's maximizing players. And like you said, they've had a ton of guys out. But, guys like Osa Odigizua stepping up. Yeah. I mean, he has maximized every single player's skill sets and, the 4-3 hybrid sub package, whatever you want to call it, but
you called it the right thing. That's what they call it. Yeah, they have an identity. Your offense doesn't have an identity.
Oh yeah, they have figured it out. But on the offensive side of the ball, I think this game is going to be critical. The 4-game stretch to end this regular season, get things going, get back the confidence, the communication between Dak and the receivers, the offensive line, establish the run game. Dak has obviously come under fire the previous 3 weeks, the slump narrative going around. But when you look at his game, do you see it as more of a mental error? And what are some of the things you're seeing with the mental processing?
Yeah, I think you make some really good points. And the general manager, Jerry Jones, comes out and he talks about, on 105.3, he's asked about slumps and stuff like that. And, everybody's looking for answers right now.
Right.
And, I have plenty of questions. I have plenty of questions about Dak. I have plenty of questions about Kellen Moore. I have plenty of questions about the offensive line. I have plenty of questions about the health of the running backs, the receivers. Offensively, what we thought was a strength coming out of Oxnard that was going to propel or carry this team has now in week 15 become something where we're now talking about it in a way of, yes, they're winning football games, but my gosh, what is wrong? The bar is so high for what you do and for Dak Prescott. And you ask about Dak Prescott, and I think with Dak Prescott, it really is more of a mental thing. But I'll also say this, though, Bray, and you love scheme. You love talking about scheme. They're not blitzing this guy.
Right.
Teams are, and they're almost giving him the Pat Mahomes treatment, what Mahomes got earlier in the season where teams would rush 3, rush 4, don't blitz. Dak Prescott, if you look at quarterback rating when blitzed, was outstanding. 117, 118, 119, something like that. And now teams are saying, you know what? You don't have a running game. You really don't. You don't. Your offensive line is not blocking well enough.
Right. So they're not allocating resources to the run.
Exactly. Your run game is non-existent. You're not blocking well enough up front. You're not getting any type of movement or push or gaps, anything. And then, like I say, you've got two running backs that are banged up. You know, you got one of your best backs is hurt. And, you know, so that's the problem that they run into right now, that teams are saying, you know what, we don't respect your running game. And you're not going to try and run.
Yeah.
You're not. You're just, the way the Cowboys are trying to run is very much a straight ahead of attack. We've talked about edge plays and stuff like that. A common term people like to talk about, if you get the ball on the edge, is pin and pull to get guys. And, you know, the Cowboys are running the ball with some pin and pull scheme earlier in the season. I think they need to go back to some of that if they can. The Giants offer that a little bit, I think, of a better opportunity for some pin and pull type scheme this week. But overall, I think with Dak, it's like teams are playing him different. His receivers really, they haven't really totally been on the same page because they all haven't played together. I mean, there's been times where Amari has been in and out. There's been times where Michael Gallup has been in and out. There was a time when CeeDee Lamb was out, you know, and they just haven't been able to really kind of build that continuity that they need with the receivers. And Dak, I feel like, is in his head is dealing with, I do believe this, Bree, his ability to run, to escape. I think this ankle, the lack of flexibility in his ankle has caused him problems of trying to get away from people.
You're seeing the
Yeah,
hesitation.
yeah. There's a couple of times where he got sacked in that football game where it was a -1 or it was a 0. I mean, a 0, no yards. It's just he couldn't get forward fast enough to avoid the pressure. And that kind of gives me a little bit of a hint. And you watch him run, it's not. You even saw him in training camp. And when you watch practice, I'm sure when Dak's running around, he doesn't look like he has that burst. But, you know, that's something. I mean, does the flexibility come back after a year or two? Yeah, maybe so. But right now, he doesn't have the flexibility. I don't know if he has a whole hell of a lot of confidence in his calf. I really don't.
Or in his protection.
Or his protection. But, that's the thing about it is when you drop back and his right leg is the ankle and the calf and everything like that, when he drops back and plants, he's probably thinking, okay, am I going to really drive off that thing? Am I really going to power off that thing? And sometimes the ball, if you don't do that, what happens? The ball goes high. You throw more upper body and shoulder and not so much using your lower body and your legs. So I think there's a mental thing going on with him right now. I think the receivers are, in and out. The offensive line, surely we've talked about Joe Philbin and the problems that they've had is they don't have the same 5 guys. And I admitted it that I wanted the left guard to be different. The left guard's different.
Right.
The left guard's not playing as well.
It hasn't improved, yeah.
So that, that's all the things. And when you start, it's not just Dak. It's not, but Kellen Moore's in a little rut too right now as a play caller. And I'll tell you this though, Bree, I'll put this on Kellen Moore. I'll put this on Mike McCarthy. I'll put this on Doug Nussmeier.
Yeah.
I'll put this on with the coach from the Giants that they got. It's helping out. And so I mean, to me, that's kind of where I'm kind of at right now. They've got all these offensive minds. They've got all these offensive minds in the building.
And talent.
And the talent, and they don't have a really, really, really good plan for that. And I think that's where, because you can't be as bad as they've been the last 4 or 5 weeks. I say that. Atlanta, they were fine. The second half of the Raider game, they were fine. But other than that, it's been really, really a lot of missed opportunities on third down, missed opportunities in the red zone, missed opportunities just really to kind of get things going again.
Well, like you've said, Kellen Moore doesn't have anything to hang his hat on right now. And I think the way teams are playing the Cowboys is also very indicative. Like you said, they're rushing 4. They know that offensive line isn't going to smash. They're not going to win the battle at the line of scrimmage. Right. They're playing more of the soft zones and coverage. And they're not allocating resources to the run. They know the Cowboys' run game is abysmal right now.
Sure.
So what are some things that you think this team needs to do on the offensive line? You're not going to have Tyron Smith back this week, but how can this line get better and get that continuity going with the people they have right now?
What weekend? Week 15?
Yeah.
Wow. Week 15 fixes. Here we go.
The carousel continues.
Yeah, the week 15 fix. I just feel like, though, with Tyron Smith, what worries me is, like, on Monday, you were in the press conference. here at the Star. Mike McCarthy immediately ruled Tyron Smith out. Just immediately. It wasn't
which he never does.
Yeah, which was like, you're like going, okay, this, people talk about bone spurs and all that. I was told it was a high ankle. That it's a complicated thing that he's dealing with. But the fact that he immediately ruled him out, and I'm thinking, well, how many other weeks is he going to get ruled out? Because, this was quick. It wasn't like, and he got whacked from behind. Connor McGovern got him pretty good. And, the ankle is the ankle with Tyron Smith. And I think they need to kind of figure out, though, with Steele playing left tackle, need to have a plan for that. They need. I don't think they're not as strong as they need to be on that left side. Mm-hmm. Now, do they become a right-handed team to protect what's going on the left side? When I mean right-handed, do the run plays start behind Martin? Does it start behind Collins? Those are the things I would kind of. The problem you also worry about too is when you run the ball to the right on that back side. Is McGovern, is he athletic enough to get a block up? That's the one thing with, at least with Connor Williams, when the ball was going to the right, and Connor Williams was what we call scoop blocking when he was working with Biotish together, and then the ball would cut back. See, he was there kind of blocking the linebacker. I don't think Connor McGovern gets there near enough, and all of a sudden you have a linebacker that's kind of running free. You have players that are running free on the second level, and so they've got to figure out, does you go back to what we were talking about, the pin and the pull? Is it McGovern blocking down? Is it Steele blocking down? Is it Schultz blocking down, and then Martin pulling, or Biotish pulling and getting guys out on the edge? And that's where you maybe miss a little bit of a Noah Brown out there too, a bigger guy. But these Cowboy receivers will block. I just don't think you could sit there and say, we're going to run the ball in the middle. We're going to keep running the ball in the middle and have a chance. Even if you try and run the ball wide to the right or on the edge to the right, you still got to worry about what's going on the backside. And that's Connor McGovern's. He's not a great athlete. He's a strong player, but he's not a great athlete. And so if he can't get his head across now you've got defensive linemen coming up the field and disrupting the play. Dak's trying to hand the ball off or toss the ball, and you're getting that penetration or the leakage from the backside, and that's
high or low snaps don't.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing with Connor Williams, though. At least he was athletic enough to either clip that guy or get his head across or grab and pull and put himself in position. So, yeah, there's a lot of things I'm wrong about with this team. That was the one that I really thought was going to make a difference, and it really has.
I think we all did.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that they're looking at it right now and they're saying, "Wow, do we want to put up with the holding penalties potentially, or do you want to, you don't want to just knee jerk this thing after 2 games, 3 games." I think they're probably going to look at it a little further and see exactly where they're at.
Well, I think yesterday during practice, it was encouraging to see you had the offensive lineman working on pulling. You saw McGovern doing some movement. Yeah. And I think last game.
You're keeping an eye on that,
right?
Aren't you?
So the Saints, you had the constant run up the middle on early downs. But then in this last game against Washington, you had the screens on third down. That constant drops. That was an absolute fiasco. So you saw guys working on that yesterday. So, but moving and looking at the defense. Yeah. They've obviously been playing lights out, absolutely dominating. And I think you had the return of Neville Gallimore, Randy Gregory. Big, so Quinn kind of dialed up, had 5 down linemen, kind of creating those one-on-one matchups.
That's exactly right.
In pass rush situations, but also, against backs.
Right.
Do you see teams now with this formidable front? Do you see teams going to more of a short passing attack, emphasizing a screen game to try and mitigate this?
I guarantee you. I guarantee you this weekend against the Giants, when you have Saquon Barkley and Booker as the backs, that's something that Freddie Kitchens, the offensive coordinator for the Giants, is going to do. They're going to. They don't trust their offensive line. They don't trust their offensive line to hold up against the Cowboys. And how do you do that? You get the ball to Saquon Barkley in space, and you make linebackers. You make maybe you get Parsons on the rush, and now the ball's past him, and now it's about Van Der Esch. It's about It's about the safeties, Curse. It's about the corners. It's, Saquon Barkley in the open field is a pretty tough tackle to get, pretty tough tackle to make. So I guarantee you're going to see, with Tony likely being out of the lineup for the Giants this week, that could be a big part of their screen game gone now. But they're going to find a way not to let you. Mike Glennon, the quarterback, is going to dump it. He's not going to let you get, now he'll take the occasional shot down the field, but I don't see teams holding the ball. I think they're going to make you, they're going to try and slow you down with the screens, maybe even lead draws, stuffing like that. But when you get up the field real fast, they're going to try and pop one through and then see if you can tackle on the second level. And that's where Leighton Vander Esch actually played pretty well for you last week. When Parsons had to do his blitz stuff and things kind of broke, it was Leighton Vander Esch getting over and making some plays, and I think that's what they kind of continue to need to have for this defense in order to be successful.
Well, I think having Neville Gallimore back also played a role, anchoring the middle of that line, helping out, kind of freeing things up for the linebackers. Yeah. He was a guy that during training camp, you and I had an eye on, was absolutely making significant strides. Yes. Everybody was excited.
One
then
of the
elbow,
the
elbow injury happened. Yeah. So, I think you've seen. Obviously, just in the game against Washington, you saw the penetration, his ability to get upfield. The sack, forklifts the center into the quarterback. But what do you think his presence adds to Dan Quinn's?
Well, you nailed it. It's power. It's power in the middle, and they didn't really have that. You kind of were thinking, Quentin Bohanna, whoever. You were thinking big bodies inside, and they don't have that. They didn't have that. The guys didn't play to the level. Now they've gotten much better on the end. And Dan Quinn even talked about that. They asked about I think you were there when they said, "Hey, you've played 30 players," and he's like, "OS," and then now he's like, "OS" in a good way. So I think the defensive coaches have kind of figured some things out, and what it's done is it's added to what they've already the ability to have. They had an idea that with Gallimore playing, they were going to get this. With Tank playing, they were going to get this. With Randy playing, they were going to get this. Now you add Micah to the mix, and now you've got Micah, Armstrong. You've got all these players that have really done a good job of stepping up while others were out. And now Dan Quinn has got different packages where he's able to say, okay, I'm gonna like you said, I'm gonna cover all 5 offensive linemen, and I'm gonna put Micah Parsons one-on-one with Antonio Gibson in the back, and he's gonna get a sack. That's the kind of stuff as a coach you absolutely live for. And I think with Neville Gallimore, he does. He just gives you so much. Think about this. The tip interception that Randy Gregory had, who got his hand on the ball first? Neville Gallimore. And if you're throwing a screen and it's like a 2-3 step drop, and he's that far up the field already penetrating to tip the ball and then tip it again, that just shows you how much power the guy was playing with right there. So it's big. You gotta have big physical people inside in order to kind of make because you're rushing so hard on the edge and you're doing things and you squeeze and then you push, and that just gives the quarterback nowhere to go.
Right. When Mike is in the conversation for not only rookie defensive player of the year, but also just defensive player of the year, first player to potentially do that since Lawrence Taylor.
1981. How old were you?
Wasn't born yet. There's been a lot of conversation.
Trust me, he's a really good player. He was a really good player.
And with the conversations that have been kind of surrounding this week with us playing the Giants, I went back and I did look at some Lawrence Taylor footage. Because obviously growing up, you hear everything about him. Just
was he as good as everybody was saying he was?
Oh my gosh, Brian. Looking back at that footage, you just had this sense of nostalgia. What he did in changing the NFL.
He did.
He really did. The linebacker edge position, but also just, he made the left tackle, the blindside tackle position, the imperative position that it is today, the lucrative deal for that position. Heck, linemen had to change their stance because they couldn't get up fast enough for his initial quickness, his get off. Now, I'm not going to ask you to compare the two specifically because personally, I don't really think that's fair looking at the totality of his incredible career, one of the best to have ever played the game against Micah in his first year. But since Lawrence Taylor's rookie season, have you seen a rookie defender dominate on the field like Micah has in his first year?
It's interesting because I've scouted some really, really good players, with Troy Polamalu, with what he did with the Steelers, Luke Kuechly with what he did with Carolina. There's guys that just, there's some defensive players. Look what Watt did. T.J. Watt coming in the league with Pittsburgh just several years ago. I mean, there's players that have come in, but they haven't had the impact. They've had an impact, but not to the impact where you and I were talking about this, because I reached out to one of my Gang of Seven members. I have a group that I like to talk to, and I asked him about these guys. I say, hey, does he compare to anybody you've ever seen? And the guys were always like, they were talking about Brian Urlacher. They were talking about a combination of Urlacher, Von Miller. They were talking about LeVar Arrington. They were talking about a lot of different guys. But the one guy had something very interesting. He said, listen, he goes, I don't see him to be compared to anybody. And I said, really? And he says, no, what's different about this guy is most guys can play on one or two levels of the defense. They either play as a rusher, play as a linebacker, that kind of thing. But what you have with him, this guy said, is interesting. You can play with him on three levels. You can rush him, you have him at the linebacker position, and then you could also play him in coverage on the back end. And see, that's what makes him so unique. The guy at Cleveland is a hell of a defensive end, great pass rusher. But Micah does things on those three levels that we were just talking about. This guy's absolutely right. And he does it with less reps as a rusher. He creates just as many turnovers, in the pocket, but with less snaps. Mm-hmm. And if you're telling me who is the defensive MVP, it's a guy that really, we haven't seen a player that can play as a rusher, a linebacker, right, and then also play in coverage as well as he has. So, yeah, that's where, the comparisons, like I said, the guys like Polamalu, Ed Reed, Brian Urlacher, and all those guys. There were Willie McGinnis. There were so many great players that when they came in the league, you watched them play, you're like, man, these – and they're Hall of Fame players, but do they do things like Micah Parsons? And I got to give, like I say, I had one of my other guys give, he's like, listen, he said the same thing. He goes, I don't have, and this is a 30-year general manager. He goes, I don't have somebody for Micah Parsons. But he goes, but what I have is praise for the Dallas Cowboys scouting department and coaching staff for realizing his strengths, mm-hmm, and actually really playing to his strengths. I think that's the greatest thing you can say about Dan Quinn and George Edwards and Joe Witt and and Aiden and those guys up. All those guys. I think that's the greatest thing you could say about them is they've honestly taken these defensive players and they've put them in positions to make plays. Yeah. And usually that's coach speak. Oh, we like to put our players in position.
Got the right things.
Yeah.
Got the right tools.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to me, that's the thing. The best praise that another general manager gave the Cowboys is they had a vision for the player, mm-hmm, and they fully are taking advantage of that vision right now. And we can all learn from what they're doing with. It's something like, oh, well, this guy reminds me of, and that's something that Jerry Jones, and working with him in the scouting department for 6 years. The question you just asked would be a Jerry Jones question. Jerry Jones would say, does he remind you of anybody you've ever seen before? And that's when you get guys, the old scouts step up, said, he reminds me of this guy, or the Lawrence Taylor comparisons. That's how you get, and then all of a sudden it's like you're comparing a guy to Lawrence Taylor, you're like going, holy S, like Dan Quinn said, yeah.
Well, and I think the fact that he's even in that conversation his first year, not even fully through the regular season, just speaks to the level that he's playing at and just how unprecedented this is for specifically this time. And like you said, credit to George Edwards, credit for Dan Quinn. And you saw even back in training camp, he was lining him up everywhere because he said, I want to see what all he can do.
Yeah.
And
they
built
early.
The defense off of him. They've built their pressures, their stunts. Everything, blitz packages, everything. He's the focal point.
You're right. And see, that's the thing about it is like when you're lacking certain players to play the scheme or do something to affect the other team's scheme, you got to have vision for players. Mm-hmm. You almost, Dan Quinn and these defensive coaches, the majority of their really good players Tank, Gallimore, those guys
Right.
haven't played. And this defense has gotten better every single week. If you had any offense at Kansas City, you win that game.
Oh, yeah.
You hold Kansas City to 3 points. Any offense would have won. I mean, any offense in that game would have won that game for the Cowboys if they just could have gotten something going. And is this a defense you can lean on? I think you can lean on Dan Quinn.
Yeah.
I think you can lean on the staff, and I think the players believe enough in Dan and all these coaches that they'll do anything that they say. Hey, we're going to play one down guy and 6 rushers, or we're going to play 6 down guys, no rushers. I mean, whatever Dan Quinn and the staff comes up with, these players have bought in. They really have.
Well, and like we've said throughout the season, towards the beginning, Kellen Moore was getting so much credit for his adaptation to defenses, but all the while, Dan Quinn, I feel like, should have been getting it as well for how he's evolved his scheme, last year during the sabbatical to what offenses are doing. And I mean, heck, just look at the workload and how he's developed Micah. I mean, he's going through. I mean, he was saying the other day that, every single week Micah has to go through not only your pass rush stunts, but also your blitz packages for both D end and linebacker every week. Yeah. And sometimes they don't even have the plan until Saturday. Yeah. And then they end up taking things out because it wasn't clean enough throughout the week.
It's all about trust. It's all about trust. And Micah and Curse, Kazee, Lewis, Brown, Diggs, these guys all trust Dan Quinn and the staff, and that when you have trust, you have buy-in, you're going to have success, and that's what they've been able to do, and good for them, because like I say, it's usually coach speak. It's usually like, oh, well, we're going to put our guys in position, and then they don't do that. Then you get beat, and you wonder why it's not working. This defensive staff really has done that, really has.
And we just have to hope that the offense can get on track with that on Sunday.
Let's hope there's a buy-in there. Yeah. But it is. 100%. I mean, no, it's like I mentioned, guys like McCarthy, Ben McAdoo, mention these guys, Doug Nussmeier. This offense has got too many guys in that room that know about offense. Mike McCarthy was a primary play caller in Green Bay for 13 years. That's what he did. That's his job. That's what he did, and he won a Super Bowl as a play caller. That's respectable. So what you have to do is, if you're Mike McCarthy, you can't sit there and just, look at Kellen Moore and go, hey, man, figure it out. No, you need to help him figure it out.
Right.
This is a guy that's been a play caller for 3 years, and we were singing his praises. We really were. But I don't think he really has anything he can hang his hat on right now. And if he could just find, 4 or 5 running plays, if he could find 4 or 5 passing plays, and so they can kind of get out of this rut they're in right now and help the quarterback. I don't think the quarterback is a very confident player. And it might be because of his offensive line and his banged up running backs and his receivers that don't have a lot of time on the job. And his play caller is not doing a great job either. So that makes your offense be a little off. And hopefully the Giants this week, you can get back to doing some things. You got the Giants and then the football team again. And then the matchup against Arizona, you want that to be a game where you're kind of going the right direction. And that's the send the message game. That's the statement. Yeah. That's the statement game, that you go beat Arizona at home. And
shot in the postseason.
And you're showing everybody in the league that you're ready to play, because Arizona is one of the better teams.
Oh, yeah. I'm interested to see.
Let's worry about the Giants this week, right?
100%. Brian, thank you so much
for
joining me again, and stay tuned for next week. And the full episode will be up on my YouTube channel.
I knew you were going to say that, though. Check out this lady's YouTube channel. She does a great job on that. A lot of great content, and I'm really proud of you for getting that together.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Right. Bye, guys.
Bye.